Greetings to you. This is Ruslan Belov, presenting the traditional daily overview of the situation on the Ukrainian theater of military operations. Donald Trump made a statement about his disappointment, and guess with whom? This time the object of dissatisfaction was not the Russian leader Putin, but the Ukrainian President Zelensky. According to Trump, Zelensky has not yet familiarized himself with the proposed peace agreement, which causes him bewilderment and suggests the Ukrainian leader's negative attitude toward this initiative. Thus, at the current moment, Russia's position is perceived by Trump positively, while Zelensky is subjected to criticism. Does such an arrangement of accents suit the Russian side? Absolutely yes. However, the stubbornness of the Ukrainian leadership, demonstrating a lack of understanding of the fact that after 12 months the geographical position of the line of confrontation will change dramatically, as will the terms of possible agreements. Personally, this position remains a mystery to me, although the most probable explanation lies in Zelensky's desire to maximally prolong his stay in power, which clarifies much. As for military operations, they do not cease, and we will continue to analyze the situation. Offensive operations were carried out on sufficiently problematic sectors. Let's begin our review with the Kharkiv region, namely the Kupyansk sector. Regarding the city of Kupyansk, no concrete news has been received. Here, an informational lull is observed, since reliable information about the current situation in the city, the location of the line of contact, and territories controlled by each side is absent. However, I believe that the informational vacuum cannot persist indefinitely, so over time visual confirmations will appear that will give us an understanding of one side or another's control over the urban territory. However, visual materials are already available from the sector east of the city, from the populated locality of Petropavlovka. Over the past 48 hours, Russian military forces conducted a storm operation on the village from two directions simultaneously, northern and southern. As you can observe, this tactic brought results. Moreover, footage of the attack from the northern direction appeared online, demonstrating how Russian military personnel on armored vehicles entered the populated locality. What are the results of the operation? From the northern side, they managed to penetrate 2 5/10 kilometers deep and establish control over Severnaya, Oktyabrskaya Zvezd, Studencheskaya, and Druzhby streets. In addition, what is important, the school building was captured, which had been used by Ukrainian military as a fortified position, as well as the church building. From the southern direction, troops managed to enter the village and advance 1.5 kilometers along Krasnaya Street. The populated locality itself, as you can see, has significant dimensions and is strongly elongated in length, so it's too early to speak of full control. Nevertheless, considering that Russian military forces are exerting pressure on the Ukrainian garrison from both sides, I believe the defenders have little time left. Holding the village with such a configuration of the front line, when you're being squeezed from two directions, is virtually impossible. Parallel to this, yesterday the Ministry of Defense reported the transition to Russian army control of the neighboring populated locality of Kucharovka. However, visual confirmation of control did not follow, so for now we note this as unconfirmed information. Considering that previously there were already, so to speak, premature statements, we'll wait for video materials. But if Kucharovka is indeed under Russian forces' control, then pressure on Petropavlovka will intensify also from the western direction. Consequently, the prospects of Ukrainian forces here are negative in any scenario. Also significant is the fact that as soon as Russian positions connect on this sector, Ukrainian military personnel located in strongpoints to the east, and there are, I must note, quite a few of them, over 10, will find themselves in encirclement. Of course, if they don't retreat in advance. True, the corridor for exit narrows daily, and at the present moment its width is less than 3 kilometers. Therefore, they should have retreated a day or two ago. If they remain at their occupied positions, they will fall into complete blockade, and no Colombian or Brazilian mercenaries will be able to deblock them. Also yesterday, an extensive list of Colombian mercenaries who died in the Kupyansk direction in recent days was published online. Losses of Colombian and other foreign mercenaries on the Ukrainian front, in all likelihood, already exceed 1,000 people. Hunters for easy money often find their end here, not having received the promised funds, but only a bullet. Moving to the next sector, the defense of Ukrainian forces in Siversk continues to rapidly collapse. Remember, 2 days earlier I informed you that fighters of the South grouping managed to penetrate and consolidate in the eastern part of the city in quarters of 5-story buildings. Over the past 24 hours, they were able to advance further, both in the depth of the city and on the flanks. In the city limits, the advance was 300 meters along Sadovaya Street. But this is not just 300 meters. Control was established over 5 more multi-apartment buildings. Additionally, along Sosura Street, they managed to advance 200 meters and also take control of 5 multi-story buildings. Thus, in total, 10 multi-apartment buildings were captured, plus a preschool institution building, plus a defensive position of Ukrainian forces in the form of school building number 3 and the neighboring college building. What do these data indicate? That there can be no talk of situation, stabilization. Even for multi-story buildings, Ukrainian military forces are unable to hold on and are retreating. What will happen when all the multi-story buildings are under Russian troops' control? It will remain to suppress resistance at the railway station plus in the industrial zone, and that's all. Ukrainian forces will not be able to hold in the private sector, because if they cannot hold multi-story buildings, then obviously in private construction they will retreat very quickly. At the same time, military personnel from the scene of events report that clashes are already ongoing in the industrial zone, although this is not yet displayed on cartography. In addition to achievements in the eastern part of the city, advancement was also noted in the southern part of Siversk. Here, control was established over Tchaikovsky and Radionovsky streets. Additionally, they advanced along Railway, Central and Yamskaya streets. Thus, already 40% of the city is under Russian control. This concerns advancements directly in Siversk itself. As for advancements on the flanks, from Platonovka they advanced 1 kilometer and reached the Liman-Siversk highway. Here already, according to information from the scene, combat operations have begun for Zakotnoe. Plus, northeast of the city, a significant sector was cleared through pushing out Ukrainian forces from a large strongpoint before the city. To the south is located perhaps the most significant advancement. They managed to expand the control zone in Sviato-Pokrovskoye. Half of this populated locality is thus already under Russian control. However, here it's still necessary to resolve the key question, the question of control over the heights north of the village. And for now, this question remains open. But as you can see, the situation for Ukrainian forces is rapidly worsening, both in the city itself and on the flanks. And the probability that military personnel will complete the taking of Siversk before the end of the current year only increases. Continuing further. On the Constantinovka direction, military forces managed to establish control over the entire section of the Chasov Yar, Constantinovka Highway. Additionally, the tram depot building was occupied. Plus, dacha plots on the southern approaches to the city were taken under control. Overall, the direction is active, and military personnel continue to gradually break through the defense of the armed forces of Ukraine. On the Gulipole direction, no current news has been received yet. Here it's worth noting that Ukrainian forces are achieving nothing at all on this sector, while Russian military forces are gradually regaining the initiative. On the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd sector, after prolonged clashes, they managed to finally suppress resistance and establish control over the village of Rovnoe. This is a well-fortified populated locality between two cities. Ukrainian forces offered resistance for a long time, but ultimately were broken. And now combat operations are being conducted for the last populated locality on this sector, for Svetlo. The encirclement of the Ukrainian garrison in Mirnograd has become even tighter, and in the city itself, the Russian army continues the offensive. In the western micro-district, they advanced 400 meters along Sobonosti Street, establishing control over 8 multi-apartment buildings, plus a store building and an ATB building. In addition, advancement by the Russian side was also recorded in Rodinskoye. Look at what's happening here. Russian military forces advanced 800 meters along Railway Street, and it turns out that Ukrainian forces are practically surrounded. The corridor for exit for them is only 400 meters. What do 400 meters mean? This means that the entire sector is within range even of small arms fire. That is, chances for exit are practically zero. So there are grounds to hope that the difficult battle for Rodinskoye will also soon come to its logical conclusion. Meanwhile, on one sector, success was achieved by the armed forces of Ukraine. In the Dnipropetrovsk region, they managed to carry out a counter-offensive and retake the village of Tikoye. As is known to those who have been following me for a long time, I always adhere to objectivity, or at least strive for it. If the armed forces of Ukraine have success on the front, I report on it. Why did such a situation develop here and Ukrainian forces manage to retake the populated locality? This is quite explicable. Since Kolomitsi has not yet been captured, holding this populated locality, having advanced forward, is difficult, even if it's possible at all. So essentially, they couldn't hold it. At the same time, it must be understood that this does not affect the overall situation on the sector in any way. And as soon as Kolomitsi is taken, Tikoye will return back under Russian control. The last sector of advancement is Gulipole. Here they managed to advance 3 5/10 kilometers and enter the city from the eastern side. 2 streets were taken under control, Krasnaya and Zareknaya. Combat operations for the city continue. They are not given easily, and it would be naive to expect easy battles. I don't want, as they say, to make premature forecasts, but those who regularly watch my releases know that from the very beginning I said that the probability that Gulipole will be taken before the end of the month is very small. And the taking of Gulipole is a prospect for January-February. The city is very well fortified. Here, there is literally a network of underground tunnels and bunkers around the perimeter of the entire city and in the city itself. Therefore, taking even one street is great labor. But jointly with assault units, aviation on a daily basis delivers batches of high-explosive aviation bombs here to facilitate the work of ground forces. Summing up the past 24 hours, 1 populated locality and 26 4/10 square kilometers passed under the control of the Russian army. Ukrainian forces, in turn, retook 1 populated locality and took 3 square kilometers under control. For today, regarding the situation on the front, that's all I have. Now let's examine what's happening in the political sphere. The government of Merz in Germany is experiencing a record drop in public support. 70% are dissatisfied with the coalition's work, reports the publication Bild. According to poll results, 70% of respondents stated their dissatisfaction with the coalition's work. This is the maximum indicator for the entire observation period. In May, immediately after the formation of the Cabinet of Ministers, less than half of those polled thought so. Merz himself is also losing trust. Over 2/3 of Germans expressed dissatisfaction with his work, and only 23% evaluate the Chancellor positively. These are the worst indicators that have ever been recorded for a sitting Chancellor and his government. Europe is convincing Zelensky not to withdraw troops from Donbass, reports Bloomberg. Europe's main goal is to avoid a situation where Zelensky will be forced to withdraw troops from Donbass and agree to a deal without serious American security guarantees, writes the agency. Europeans plan to convey this idea to the USA. For now, Europe adheres to a strategy of public approval of American efforts, relying on Russia not agreeing to the terms. European diplomats report that recently communication with the American and Ukrainian sides has been difficult. Europe is preparing for Trump to distance himself from the war if he cannot achieve an agreement. With the USA's departure, Europe will have to decide whether it can continue to support Ukraine both with weapons and financially. It remains unclear whether Europe will be able to develop a viable plan for continuing Ukraine's financing, writes the publication. And further, as they say, no comment. In the Rada they stated that if Ukraine wins the war, monuments to Zelensky will stand on all main squares of the country. They also noted that for this it's necessary to make unpopular decisions, and then supposedly all scandals will be forgotten. The decline of Europe as part of American strategy. An interesting passage in the new US national security strategy about the possible, moreover in the very near future, civilizational erasure of Europe. American officials are accustomed to thinking about European problems exclusively in categories of insufficient military spending and economic stagnation. There is some truth in this, but Europe's real problems lie even deeper. Continental Europe is steadily losing its share in world GDP, from 25% in 1990 to 14% today, partly due to national and supranational regulations that suppress creativity and industriousness. But economic decline pales in comparison with a much more serious and acute threat, the threat of civilizational erasure. Europe's key problems include the activities of the European Union and other supranational bodies undermining political freedoms and sovereignty, migration policy radically changing the continent's appearance and generating conflicts, censorship of freedom of speech and suppression of political opposition, catastrophically low birth rates, loss of national identity and self-confidence. If current trends continue, in 20 years or even earlier, the continent will be unrecognizable. With such a development of events, it's not at all obvious whether individual European countries will be able to maintain sufficiently strong economies and armies to remain reliable allies. Many of these countries are now only doubling down on their current failing course. It's clear that this passage is more a political pamphlet than a forecast, moreover a pamphlet oriented toward Trump's allies in Europe, but it's interesting nonetheless. Speaking of the EU, Elon Musk demanded the liquidation of the EU. The businessman is dissatisfied with the country's lack of sovereignty. Billionaire Elon Musk expressed complaints in his social network about the European Union. In the entrepreneur's opinion, the organization prevents states that are part of it from properly representing their people. Before this, he also criticized the EU and wrote that bureaucracy is strangling Europe. It's noteworthy that Musk's social network was recently fined by the European Commission for violation of transparency norms. The company must pay 120 million euros. In response, the businessman published a post in which he wrote that the European Commission loves censorship more than life.